boxes, things they have to manipulate with their hands, figure out with their brain how to get this puzzle open so I can get the food out. I encourage you all to come to Little Rock Zoo between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, go up to the great ape area, and you'll watch the apes come out and get their enrichment items. You'll see them play with it. They use clothing. They use boxes. You know, they can communicate with us using American Sign Language. I had an interesting debate with a linguistics professor one time who said that apes don't understand language. They do simple mimicry. And I said, well, you know, Washu, the chimpanzee, knows 290 signs in American Sign Language. How many words of chimpanzee do you know? Thank you.
All right, let's see. If we evolved from apes, why do we have a conscious know what is right and wrong, and apes do not? I think it is fascinating to study the apes. The apes are very complex creatures, and I'm thrilled for those who take time to study them and try to protect them and things like that. I'm certainly not in favor of exterminating any species at all. But I think the fact that the ape is such a complex creature and is able to work very well in his environment is proof he was designed by a very intelligent designer. Certainly not proof that we have a common ancestor with them. Again, a freshman law student could take that one apart in a few seconds if it was on trial. But it's not, unfortunately. It needs to be. They keep putting creation on trial. You know, should it be taught in the schools? Well, let's put evolution on trial. Where's the evidence for this theory? Okay, and so I have no other response other than I agree they're very complex creatures, but I think it's evidence of design. It's not evidence of a common ancestor. There's two questions on one, Dr. Hartman, if you don't mind. Apparently one of your students, because they signed their name, you said they get credit or something. What is your definition of kind? I would say the same kind of animal are those that were probably originally able to reproduce. In the original created kind, they were able to reproduce, and they may have diversified now because of all sorts of factors, that now they're no longer able to reproduce, but they're probably still recognizable as the same kind as having descended from an animal that was able to reproduce. Second question on the same card, so your student gets 2 points, I guess. Why can't you believe evolution and creation? Can you prove there's a God? Well, I guess you'd have to go back to what is the definition of evolution. If you mean animals produce a totally different kind, well, there's no evidence for that. If you mean can animals produce varieties, well, certainly I believe that. So you'd have to define the word evolution before I could answer that question. As far as could God use evolution, couldn't God have used evolution to get us here? Well, I have several points I'd like to make on that. Number one, that is not the clear teaching of the Bible. I mean, that's pretty obvious. If you want to believe God used evolution, you're certainly welcome to do that. However, that is not what the Bible teaches. Secondly, I have to point out, that would be a retarded God who couldn't make it right first time. I would not worship a God like that, that's for sure. My personal unbiased opinion is that people who believe in theistic evolution are trying to find a nice little God that they can put in a box someplace and control him because they don't want him controlling their lifestyle. That's my personal opinion. Thirdly, it's not in the character of my God to use misfits, suffering, and death like evolution calls for. Evolution calls for blind chance, randomness, nobody knows what's going on, let's just toss it out and see what happens. That's not in the character of the God that I worship. Fourthly, it nullifies the need for the death of Christ. If there was already death here in the world, if creation is true, then man brought death into the world, and death is a terrible thing. If evolution is true, death brought man into the world, and death is a wonderful thing because that's how we get ahead. See, if evolution is true, one species has to, or one animal within the species has to evolve a little better than the rest, and the rest of them have to die in order for the good one to take over the living space. That's Adolf Hitler's philosophy exactly. Number 5, there's no evidence for evolution anyway, so why compromise a perfectly good Bible with a dumb theory like that?
I was asked earlier to define macroevolution. Macroevolution is simply an accumulation of microevolutionary change over time such that you no longer get two species who are capable of mating naturally and producing fertile offspring. That's what Dr. Hovind just said happened. You have animals branching out until they're no longer able to reproduce. That's macroevolution, and I'd like the 250,000 in small bills delivered to my office. I mean, that's it, folks. That's our definition of macroevolution. It's the definition that's in all the science textbooks. That's macroevolution in a nutshell. You get enough accumulated microevolutionary changes until you can't have two species mating and producing the same kind of animal anymore. That's it. In fact, I put the chart up there and I explained it to you. That's what it is. Why can't you believe evolution and creationism? I don't see why you can't. I don't think that if you're a theistic evolutionist or whatever term you want to call them, that you're necessarily putting God in a box, trying to control God. I think it's people that are trying to figure out a way that they can merge their faith, their belief, their notion of spirituality with what their eyes and their mind tells them, what we observe about the natural order of the world. You know, there has to be a way. If I believe, and I'm using the I rhetorically, if I believe there's a God, but I also understand that evolution is the way things work, then I'm going to try and put the two things together, and I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. Can you prove there is a God? You know, I wouldn't try to make such an offer, but you know, the offer, the $250,000 offer, you could just as easily twist it around and say, I'll offer anybody in the room $250,000 if they can offer me proof that God exists to my satisfaction, because that's what Mr. Hovind is saying. You have to prove it to my satisfaction in order for me to give you the money. Well, again, I'll ask what his criteria are. Well, proving all five of those literally means you do have to create a new universe, because that's the first step in his list of things that you have to prove. If I could create a new universe, I would be like a god. And evolution doesn't teach us that we're trying to be gods. We're just trying to be people. Thank you.
Okay, my question here was asked, what about the geologic column? Discuss the significance or lack of it to the layers of geologic formation. The geologic column was invented in the 1830s by many people. Charles Lyell's the primary culprit. Each layer was given a different name and age and an index fossil. I taught earth science for 15 years. The geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist. It only exists one place in the world, and that is in the textbooks. There is no geologic column. They know that, those who study it. This author said, if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. There is no geologic column. There are many layers to the earth, that's true, but those all formed during one big flood in the days of Noah. The fact that you can prove this because in between these layers there are seldom, if ever, found any erosion marks. Now, don't you think if that layer sat there for 10 million years waiting for the next one to be laid down, there'd be a little bit of rain? Plus, where did the next layer come from? But from further sediments, which indicates more water moving. So, of course, there'd be erosion marks. There aren't erosion marks between these layers. The geologic column is a hoax. It doesn't exist. It's based on circular reasoning. I go through that on my videotape number 4 for 30 minutes about the geologic column. The layers are not different ages. They cannot be. And it's all based on circular reasoning. I prove all that from lots of quotes on video number 4. Let me get to one more point in my last minute. It's all dated by index fossils. Get up here. Oh, right here. No. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing straight up. They're running through multiple rock layers. Now, these rock layers are dated at vastly different ages. They'll say this layer is 10 million years older than the one, above it, and yet we find petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. Sometimes petrified trees are upside down, running through many rock layers. Those rock layers all had to be laid down in a big flood. The tree didn't stand there for millions of years waiting for the mud to form around it. Mount St. Helens is producing the exact same phenomena right now from the thousands of trees that were blown into Spirit Lake back in 1980. They're being buried standing up. None of them grew there, and it's going to